Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel where we like to talk about tools or tech every Tuesday. And we like to talk about some random YouTube channel that I think is worth watching on Fridays. Today, I thought we'd talk about Steve Lehto and his show, Lehtos Law. Let's get into it. So Steve Lehto is a lawyer here in Michigan, and my understanding is that he specializes in the lemon law. So Steve Lehto does some really interesting videos. Sometimes he tackles some really controversial subjects, and he says that he likes to avoid really political stuff, which is perfectly understandable, but he felt like he had to do this one. And it just recently happened, and that is Nancy Pelosi tearing up President Trump's State of the Union address. They give people, when they come in the room, they give them these written speeches. President Trump, I believe, handed this directly to her, if I remember right. And at the end of the speech, she tore it up. People were saying, oh, she's going to go to prison. And I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but I wondered if maybe they would say, well, you know, that's federal property or something. But Steve tackles this in one of his videos. And it was really interesting. I was really interested in what the technicalities might be behind that. So that's definitely an interesting video to go check out. So another video Steve did that I thought was really interesting, and it was recent, was a video on this article that had been written by, I think, Inside EVs. So this Tesla owner had apparently taken his Tesla in for repairs, and on the receipt, the Tesla Service Center says, Goodwill Repairs. Now, this owner and the author of this article are afraid that Tesla is going to try to skirt the lemon laws by saying, well, that wasn't a warranty repair, that was a goodwill repair. And Steve says in his experience, I think he says like 28 years of being an attorney in the lemon laws, that he says that it's not going to make a difference, because regardless of what you call it, and regardless if it was fixed or not, it's going to fall into something where you took it in to have it repaired, there was an issue, and therefore it falls into the wording of the law. And so he says that it isn't going to make any difference. Tesla won't be able to get around the lemon law by simply writing on there goodwill repairs. So I thought that was really interesting. So Steve goes into a lot of different areas, and sometimes he'll cover things that will help you avoid scams. He'll do things that might help you do things, so if you do have to go to court or you do have to press charges in some way, then you can do it in an effective manner and actually have a case to win. So to give you an idea of some of the videos that Steve does, here are some of the titles. Man says he burned $1 million despite ex-wife. School fined for showing Lion King. So apparently they were fined for showing a kids movie in a school. File lawsuits, run for judge. Yes, you may need a permit to look at the stars. When a stamp is a license. Pictures from a marathon. Man gets prison. Legal in Michigan, but illegal in Fed. And that means in federal law. Yeah. Beware of online e-skimmers. In a video entitled Feds Sue Robocallers, Steve goes through this whole thing where basically these people overseas are using voice over IP, which are programs similar to like FaceTime or Skype, and they are they're calling through these voice providers over here, and that's how they are able to get their calls in to us. And there's a couple of companies that are knowingly, allegedly knowingly, going ahead and letting these robocalls through. And so basically the federal government is suing them and fining them and getting them to stop. And so hopefully we're going to have less robocalls very soon. Now, it may not be perfect, it may not cut out all of them, but at least, like Steve said, at least we're making progress. So another video that I really liked that Steve did was Hero Judge Takes on Civil Forfeiture. So if you're unfamiliar, the idea is that the cops think that you may have committed a crime, or something that you own has been involved in a crime, and they don't have to prove it, you don't have to be convicted of anything, and they can just take it. So you're out and they take your card, your cash, your jewelry, whatever it is, and they can legally take that in a lot of states. So now there are some judges in some states that are kind of waking up and saying, well, we all know this is wrong. It does make sense in a criminal forfeiture, but we're talking about a civil forfeiture here, where, so the criminal forfeiture, it's you've been convicted of a crime, and that makes sense. If you stole money, you should have to give it back. You can't keep that. But you steal a car, you can't keep that. But in this case, there was one case that I don't remember if it was on his video or if it was the one that I saw recently on the news, where a girlfriend had lent her boyfriend her car. He took it and he was selling drugs out of it. The cops busted them, took the car, and she has no legal recourse to get her car back. The cops legally took her car even though she's completely innocent of this whole thing. He was the one selling the car. He borrowed the car from her, and she had no idea that he was going to be selling drugs out of it, and yet she loses her car. And so kudos to this judge for fighting this kind of crap. So one of the things I like about Steve and his show Lehtos Law is the stories that he tells. Sometimes there are some really wacky things, and one was from his own personal life. I don't remember the title of the video, but basically he moved into this house, and the owner of the adjacent property was claiming that he owned this land, and he was getting mad at Steve for cutting the grass over to what Steve's property had been surveyed to actually go to. This guy was claiming that Steve was cutting a few feet onto his yard, and so he showed him the documentation and everything, and that didn't make any difference, and this guy was still just cranky, and so he ended up putting up a fence, and this guy tried to mess with him in all kinds of ways. Steve has this big truck that he was talking about, and I don't know, you just have to watch the video. It's pretty funny. So I forgot to mention in this part of the video that Steve was talking about in the story, when he's talking about this, that these metal rods just were somehow working their way up out of the ground, and the neighbor would be out there cutting that patch of land that belonged to Steve, and thunk, his mower would stop, and just a couple weeks later, all of a sudden, thunk, his mower would stop again. And so I don't know, I just found it funny. Maybe he should have called that one Lehto's Lawn. So anyway, I think Steve brings a lot of value to his viewers in a few ways. Number one, he helps you avoid some scams, and that could save you some money and a lot of heartache. And number two, he helps you know what you might want to do and things you might want to think about. So if you ever have to file a lawsuit, you might have your ducks in a row and be able to actually have a case. And number three, it's just comical, some of the stories he has. So, that entertainment value alone is worth watching. So I highly recommend checking out Lehtos Law. So I'll have a link in the description. Thanks so much for watching another Follow Friday. See you next time. Oh, I thought someone was on the porch. Wait for that car to go by. Understandable, but he felt like he needed to do this one. And it recently just happened. Well, I guess that would have made sense. I shouldn't laugh. I don't remember what the wording was. Steve says in his experience as an attorney, man claims he burned 1 million. No, wait, it wasn't that. Maybe someone had something of yours and you were and they on civil forfeiture. So if you're unfamiliar with this, so civil forfeiture, I can stop stumbling over my words. So in another video titled "Feds Sue Robocallers," oops.